Hey, hi. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do AWS deployments using Terraform Cloud and GitHub Actions while using OIDC authentication mechanism, which is a secure and passwordless authentication mechanism that we can use it at AWS Cloud, right? So here, let's see how we can leverage that secure credentialless authentication mechanism to do our AWS deployment with using CI/CD tool like GitHub Actions and Terraform for infrastructure as a code, especially Terraform Cloud to store the infrastructure as a code state file, right? So this is the PPT which gonna depict my demo here today. So here, as you see in this design diagram, it depicts my complete the lab session here. So basically, a developer who is developing or working on an infrastructure as a code, a coding basically. So he's gonna write a Terraform file and the GitHub Actions file that is required to provision the infrastructure in the AWS, right? And but here we're gonna, as I said, so we're gonna use a Terraform Cloud to store the remote state file. So we're gonna have a Terraform Cloud state. We're gonna have the Terraform Cloud workspace for storing the Terraform state file, right? Similarly, we have a AWS where actually we are provisioning the infrastructure with using infrastructure as a code, right? So here, the main focus of this demo is, how do you leverage the OIDC authentication, that is OpenID Connect based authentication, which is a secure and passwordless authentication mechanism, right? Which we can, how we can leverage that kind of authentication mechanism in this scenario, right? So this is what the the demo main point is here, right? So for that case, what we have to do is, so here we're gonna create an identity provider in the AWS IAM, especially for GitHub Actions, right? And once the identity provider is been created, we're going to reference that identity provider in the IAM role in AWS IAM service, right? And so basically that IAM role will be used in the AWS, so in the GitHub Actions workflow to authenticate with the to authenticate with the AWS account. Yeah. So to authenticate with the AWS account, we just have to reference only the IAM role that we have created here, but not the any kind of IAM AWS IAM secret key, and the secret is not required, no more required here in these cases, right? So that is the main aim. So how do we do this kind of the secure and the credentialless mechanism to achieve our CI/CD workload here, right? So that is where the point is here, right? So for example, so let's say we have created IAM role with the GitHub Action as identity provider. So under the hood, the GitHub Actions will again use the the OpenID the token. So basically, so whenever we use the OIDC authentication mechanism, the workload basically it hits the OpenID Connect endpoints and receives a JWT token, and that JWT token will be collaborated with the IAM role that we gonna configure on the GitHub Actions. And with using this, it's gonna receive, you're gonna get an authentication from the AWS, and you're gonna receive as a short-lived AWS access token. With that access token, we're gonna do the like a Terraform code run, so basically we do a Terraform plan and apply. Yeah. So that is where this complete diagram depicts. Yeah. Basically, so once you are authenticated here, then you can invoke the TFC and get the response. So basically, TFC is again under the hood. It is actually doing the AWS deployment, which is nothing but it is invoking the AWS. It is actually invoking the AWS APIs basically. Yeah. All right. So this is all about the the brief about my lab session today. So now with that, I'm going to take you to the my source code. Yeah. So I'm going to take you back to the my source code here. So I'm going to take you back. So this is my source code, which I have kept in a particular repository at my GitHub, right? So before I go to the the immediate like code walkthrough and the the configuration that you need to maintain in your GitHub Actions and also GitHub the GitHub Action workflow files and all. First one, let me show you how do you need to create the identity providers. I believe that I have in detail create a dedicated session like how do you authenticate to the AWS account with using the OIDC Connect from the GitHub Actions. In a dedicated video, please do watch that video from the belongs to the another I have another dedicated video in my channel. You can find it there from there. Yeah. So for now, in this scenario, what I did is I'm gonna just quickly walk you through here. So I have created an identity provider for GitLab.com. Yeah. And once that identity provider is been created, you're gonna get the ARN of this one. So we're gonna use this ARN in the authentication mechanism. So for this case, for this scenario, I have created AWS IAM role like this with the name like this, and I have given full access because this is just a demo, right? And just the main aim here is how do you leverage the OIDC Connect for TFC authentication, right? So in this case, I have created a trust relationship file, something like this. In this one, if you see, I have put down the ARN of the federated, the principal, that is, githubuser.com, yeah. And then actions is like, assume role web identity. So basically it assumes a role in with the web identity, and condition when. So basically, I do add the condition so that, it just, we are stipulating this kind of authentication only from a particular GitHub repository, which is recommended. So this is my GitHub repository, and I have added the conditions. And the actions which could be allowed is, STS, basically the, basically the service which gonna use it is, stsamazon.com, yeah. So anyway, so this, this example, how do you, create a trust relationship JSON file. I have an example template which I'm going to share it at my GitHub action. So I'm going to share this file to my GitHub repository, and from there I'm going to share you the link of my GitHub repository as well, so you can find this file from there as well. Yeah. So this is the prerequisite of creating IAM role with the trust to the OIDC Connect. In depth, I have, as I said, in depth I have explained everything from scratch to end in another dedicated video. You can watch that video. Yeah. So for now, and also the main aim is how do we authenticate to the TFC, right? So that is our main aim here. So I have created a repository called AWS TFC, OIDC authentication. Yeah. And in this one, I have the multiple folders like a workflow folder, and just a dummy modules like backup IAM module, backup info. Basically, this just creates a backup infrastructure with the required IAM roles and permissions. Okay, and I have a main.tf file. I have a terraform.tf file. I have a trust policy JSON. So this is the file I am going to share it with you. Basically, I'm going to share this complete repository link. You can reference it, and you can use the same from your side. And we do also have a variables.tf file as well. Okay, so this is all about my repository. How did I maintain the folder structure? I'm going to walk you through the main important part of the code as well, just after this one. Yeah. So on the other side, okay, so I have a subscription on Terraform Cloud. So Terraform Cloud can be accessible by going to a site called https://app.terraform.io, right? And after that, after you log in successfully, you're gonna go to the your organization. So currently my org is cloudquicklabs, which is my channel, and I have created a project called test project. Under that test project, I have created a workspace called TFC AWS OIDC workspace. So in this workspace, if I go to the variables, see here, I'm not setting anything, but still the runs are getting executed. So that is the magic of this particular part of the demo. All right. So basically, let's say that let's assume that you have created a TFC workspace like this, yeah, and we have now we are set with the let's go and we are set with all the required resources. Now we need to see what are all the configuration that we need to maintain in the source code to achieve the required CI/CD solution like this, which I have explained in this slide. Yeah. So like, how do we do the AWS deployment now with using this kind of authentication mechanism? Yeah. So as I said, I have cloned this repository. I'm gonna go back. So basically, I have cloned this repository in my GitHub, so in my VS Code. So this is my VS Code, and this is my repository which I cloned from here. Now I'm gonna quickly walk you through the code, right? And then we're gonna see how does this authentication works in the real time by walking you through the GitHub Action workflow. And I will run this GitHub Action workflow as an example run, and we're going to see how does it works basically. Yeah. So I'm going to quickly walk you through this particular repository source codes from top to bottom, yeah, or from bottom to top. Anyways, first one, let me go to the what did I keep in a variables.tf file, and why did I keep it? I'm going to explain it. Yeah. So here we're going to keep a 4 variables called access key, secret key, token, and reason. So why I'm keeping is because since we are using the OIDC authentication, right? So in GitHub Actions, so basically whenever you use the OIDC authentication in the GitHub Actions with using GitHub Actions, so GitHub Action gets authenticated to AWS with using the JWT token plus the account role ARN. Yeah. And once it is authenticated, so but still that is not enough for TFC to get TFC to get authenticated to AWS, right? So if I go back to this one here, the GitHub action is getting authenticated with the short-lived access token, but TFC is not. So how do we make TFC to get authenticated to AWS and then do the deployment? So that is the magic here, right? Alright, so for that purpose, we need these access key, secret key, token, and region. So I'm going to explain these, how I'm using it. So basically, access, secret, and the token are being marked as a sensitive so that it does not print in the GitHub actions. Okay. Similarly, for regions, okay, I'm just keeping it as a non-sensitive. Yeah. And then we go to the terraform.tf file. So the terraform.tf file is nothing but it's a file where you declare the Terraform versions and the backend information, blah blah. And likewise, I have declared here the the providers, that is Terraform provider. For my case is AWS. Yeah. And the version I'm maintaining for provider is 4.66. Yeah. And then the TFC backend. So here my the state file backend is basically a remote backend, which is a Terraform Cloud is nothing but it's a remote or a SaaS service, right? Henceforth, I'm giving the organization name equal to cloudquicklabs, and the workspaces I showed you. This is my workspace. Similarly, let's go to the Terraform code. So the files and the files present underneath the folder like backup IAM and backup infra are purely Terraform code to provision my infrastructure, right? So yeah, so though this is this is just an exemplary infrastructure, but I'm going to walk you through this as well, right? So so now in this file we are main.tf file. So this is the main, as name says, it's a main.tf file, is a file which actually gets run when you invoke a Terraform init underneath directly to this to the repository, that is AWS TFC OIDC authentication. So if you run any kind of Terraform init from this one, so this is the file which is going to execute, right? And henceforth here we are adding a provider called AWS with the parameters like region, access key, secret key, and token. So access key, secret key, tokens are being referenced from the variables. Okay, that is one reason I explained you variables. So those variables are being referenced here one after the other. And then I'm creating a two modules. Yeah, so basically writing a Terraform code with using module is the best way, right? Alright, so here we are writing a module called backup IAM, and it is references to a folder called backup IAM, right? And similarly backup infra. So backup infra is again referencing to the folder called backup infra, but it depends on completion of IAM. So that is the reason depends on is been used. Now we're going to go back to the Terraform file present underneath these folders. So this is basically this is the, as name says, IAM backup. So here I'm provisioning IAM roles and policies required to achieve the backup at AWS. Yeah. So for that case, we are just creating a policy document, few policy examples, right? And then we are actually creating an IAM role. You see, I'm creating IAM role and creating IAM policies, or basically attaching IAM policies. Yeah. And that is what it is happening in a backup IAM. Now I'm going to quickly go to the backup infra. So I'm going very fast, no problems, because I'm going to share the source code link in my video's description. You can find it from there. And here we're going to go to the backup infra. So this is the basically as name says, here we're going to create a infrastructure required to take a backup in AWS. Basically vault and the plan will be created here. So that's the reason you see we have a backup vault been created. We have plan been created by referencing each other. Yeah. Alright, then finally we have a backup selections. Everything is been created here. So basically why I'm going this fast is because these two folders are nothing but exemplary infrastructure that I'm provisioning, and the Terraform file written in this one are compact to are intact with the the Terraform syntaxes. Okay. Alright, so next one is the most attraction point is this is the most important file, or most attraction point of this demo is this one. So I'm going to walk you through this one very smoothly and very nicely here. So here so we are defining a workflow file called tf_apply. As name says, this file is meant to achieve the the Terraform apply. So this is nothing but another example of GitHub action workflow file. It contains a name, so that's the reason the Terraform apply infrastructure release name is being given. And then we are defining the conditions on which condition this workflow has to get invoked. That is basically on push to the branch called main. So if somebody pushes something to this branch source code, then this GitHub action gets invoked. And then we are using a key called permissions, which is mandatory when you are using JWT token based authentication, right? So that's the reason you say token basically you are telling, hey token, you have permissions to read and write. Yeah. So that is what you are telling. right? And then we're gonna go to the jobs. So jobs is nothing but so basically here I have only one job, basically that is a Terraform job, because I'm doing Terraform job here only, right? So in the Terraform job, we have a couple of tasks are being created. I'm going to walk you through that as well. And in that task only the required authentication mechanism is happening. Yeah. So how it is happening, let's go see. And yeah, let's see here. So first one is the name of the basically job is Terraform job. And then so this job will run on a machine called Ubuntu latest, right? Then the environmental variable that we are setting is AWS region, that is US East one. And the job tasks or steps or something like this. First one is to basically check out the source code. So whenever you run a GitHub action workflow, the mandatory step, basically the first step is just to check out your source code, so that you can compile your source code and do the required job, basically. Yeah. All right. So and then comes the the AWS. Yeah. So basically then comes the actual thing called configure AWS credentials. So here we are using, so I'm using the, basically we are using the API of GitHub action called configure AWS credentials at the rate version 2, right? So this is a AWS, this is a GitHub Actions API, which is used in the GitHub Actions to do the required job, because here, I want to configure the credentials. Basically here credential of type what? Basically we are using the OIDC authentication, right? So that's the reason we have to use this, GitHub action endpoint. Yeah. And then with this, so basically to use this, GitHub action endpoint, we need to give the parameter like role to assume. So this is the role ARN, that we have created. If I go back to the IAM console, and you find this, ARN, yeah, and this is the ARN. I'm keeping it just away here, so for example. Yeah? So this is the ARN, yeah, and the role session, because whenever somebody takes a session, so that a session has to have a name. So that's the reason I'm just taking a sample role session, and the region is again a US East region is been forwarded. Yeah. So basically this is the one which is actually uses the OIDC based authentication mechanism, and also does gets authenticated with the AWS, and henceforth so after this a task gets run, automatically a GitHub action machine will be having the credentials like AWS access key ID, and the access key secret will be automatically set on that GitHub Actions machine. Okay, and that's the reason this is very important task in this workflow definitions. And then basically, so let's say we are done with this one, then we are actually doing a next task with the name called setup Terraform. As name says, we are actually we do a installation of Terraform, and we also then do a setting up, basically making a connection to the Terraform. Okay, so here we are using TFC, right? So and basically to authenticate to the TFC, we need a TF API token, that is a TFC API token, right? So I'm going to show you what did I do for TFC API token. If I go to the GitHub Actions, and if I go to the settings, right, and then if I go to the secrets, yeah, so if I go to secrets and variables of GitHub Actions, and here I have created a repository secret called TF API tokens. That is nothing but the one which is referenced. So how did I create that? So basically it's going to the TFE, going to this TFC, and go to the user settings. Yeah, go to the user settings, and then you're going to create a token like this. So this is the token which I created. Just to create a token, just click on this one, and just click on and just give a the name of your token, and then click on generate a token. It will give you a GUID, and the GUID value has to be kept in here, and that is what been referenced here as well. That is secret.tfe token is been referenced here. So why do we feed this CLI config credential token? Is basically with using this token, the HashiCorp setup will be done with using this one. Yeah, basically it gets authenticated to the TFC in general. And then comes the Terraform init task. So this is where actually the actual magic is happening, because even though we are using the OIDC authentication of GitHub Actions, we also, I said, we also still have the AWS access key ID, AWS secret access key, AWS session token gets registered automatically once via this method. I explained that, right? So once that is done, so why don't we reuse those to authenticate our Terraform init, right? So that's the reason what I am doing is this is what we are doing. It basically we are running an echo command. So echo command is nothing but you are again setting the variables. Yeah, so the variables are like access key, So access key value is coming from, if you see, it is coming from the AWS access key ID. So how does this access key ID gets a value? Because of this authentication. So whatever the authentication happens here with using the OIDC based authentication mechanism, right? So at the end, you're going to generate AWS access key ID secret, right? So that is where those values are retrieved and pointed to another variables called access key. Similarly, the secret key, right? So secret key is pointed to AWS secret key, right? And the token, the session token, is also set on a variable, environmental variable called AWS session token, right? So basically, so whatever the environmental variable gets set when it when the the GitHub action gets authenticated with the OIDC Connect, right? And those values are copied to another local variables called tokens, like this, yeah. Similarly, reasons, okay. And then finally, what we are doing is, you see here, I'm doing a T and copying those everything to a way to a credential, that is a Terraform credentials, okay. That's a so there is a by default a static or a reserved name called credentials.auto.tfr. So to that file, we are passing these information, right, and storing it. Henceforth, whenever the Terraform runs the next consecutive commands, it gonna reference the credentials from that file, basically, yeah. So under the hood, this is like a workaround. So you are using the GitHub action OIDC Connect, which generates the required the key and the secret plus token, and these are being fed to credentials.auto.tfrs, which is eventually used by the Terraform commands, yeah. And that's where the magic is happening. You see the Terraform init, so whenever these values are set, so we are executing Terraform init. And then comes the Terraform plan. Since the credentials are stored in this the credentials are stored in the credentials.auto.tfr, so basically all these commands references the required credentials from there and does the job of Terraform plan and all, yeah. Similarly, checks the Terraform status, and finally we're gonna so we're gonna run a command called Terraform apply. All right, so this is how it works basically. Now time has come to show you the demo. So let's see how does it actually works. So for that case, I have to just do some tweaks here in this some does not making sense changes. Okay, so I'm just doing that. Okay, basically this code has already been been ran again. So since we run it again, so basically we should experience no change. Okay, so because I'm not going to do any kind of changes here, yeah. All right, so I'm gonna commit this not making sense changes. I will tell demo changes, yeah. So I will, let me call it as demo changes. Commit this. I'm going to sync this information to the upstream GitHub repository, which should invoke our GitHub actions, right? And we should see that our GitHub actions running as expected. You see, so I'm back to the AWS TFC OIDC authentication repository of my GitHub account, and I'm in a workflow name called Terraform apply infra release. If I open the the workflow which got triggered because I pushed something to the main branch, right? And here you go, right? So first one, credential has been generated, Terraform setup is done, Terraform init is also in progress, right? It works like blink of eyes, it will gonna work very fast, right? So I'm going to walk you through the output of each, right? So for example, first one, configure AWS, which is actually a OIDC authentication, the step, right? So here you see it is assuming a role like this, a session name is like this, audience is here is a sts.amazon.com, and henceforth it got basically authenticated, right? And then comes the Terraform status, setup. The Terraform setup we are doing with the CLI, that is the the CLI config credentials which I have got from this one, right? That is token. And the Terraform setup is being worked like this, yeah. And then goes the Terraform init. So once the Terraform, so in Terraform init we are actually doing so many magic, right? That is setting the retrieving the AWS the environmental variables, are basically GitHub action environmental variables, which is belongs to the AWS authentication variables, are being extracted and pointed to another variables on the GitHub action. So that is what it happens in the Terraform init. And then comes the Terraform plan. So since it is authenticated as expected, that's the reason Terraform plan is working, or else Terraform plan would have thrown an error, right? All right, it has went green. If I go to the plan again, you see that it says the no change. You see no change, your infrastructure matches the configuration, right? Likewise, our Terraform apply will also do the same job. It just evaluates no change, your infrastructure matches the configuration is been posted. Post configuration credentials, everything will be done, cleanup will be done, and blah blah thing will happen, yeah. All right, so if I go back to the infrastructure, so this is where it looks like that, yeah. All right, so I believe that I have showed you the authentication mechanism. that we could leverage at the the Terraform Cloud. So basically at Terraform Cloud, we are not using the traditional method of keeping the AWS secret key, AWS access key and secret and region values. Traditionally, we used to hard code them in a Terraform Cloud, and that was had a chances of, or potentially had a chances of getting hacked by something else, and your account could get compromised, right? So this mechanism, that thing will not happen here, because you are using the OIDC authentication to even to deploy the infrastructure with using Terraform. All right, and especially with using GitHub Action as a CI/CD tool. All right, so with that note, I have successfully shown you the things need to be shown in this video. Finally, a kind request, please do subscribe my channel. That would really encourage me a lot. With that note, thank you, thanks a lot, and see you in the next video.